In my last video about doubles, I discussed how double hits are complicated and are not simply caused by one or two things. In fact, I believe that the majority of doubles are the result of various risk factors. Or to put it another way, certain behaviors in fencing are more risky and therefore can predispose someone to more double hits. So for this video, I will be taking a look at a handful of exchanges that resulted in a double and discussing what went wrong, why, and how this could potentially be avoided. Please keep in mind that because I am, for the most part, only highlighting double hits, which is a pretty negative outcome, this has the potential to misrepresent someone's fencing. All the people analyzed in this video had plenty of very good exchanges, and I'm just highlighting some of the bad. That is why I did not include the names of the people in this video. This is not about pointing out people who double, because we all do. This is about trying to learn from a couple of examples. So with that out of the way, let's begin. So 5 doubles in one match, all with basically the same cause. Real fast, let's call the guy in the blue gambeson Alpha and the one in the black gambeson Beta. So we see Alpha always initiate the exchange, as well as always being left leg forward and 4 out of 5 times targeting the left side of Beta's head. This is unusual. Generally you see a passing step and a overhow to the right side of the head. This is a really obvious attack, but will almost always end in a good bind. Because it is such a common attack, your opponent will see it coming, will have practice defending against it, and unless they are simply suicidal, will make an attempt to address the threat. From what I can tell, Alpha is trying to use surprise to his advantage by attacking in an unusual way. Unfortunately, by attacking the left side, he does not address or control Beta's sword, or contest the center line, leaving himself open to attack. From Beta's perspective, he knows Alpha has initiated an attack, but because it is unusual, he likely hasn't practiced defending against this specific attack, so he does what he has practiced, attacking an opening when he sees one. He didn't address the threat, however, so they double out. Key takeaway points? Don't reinvent the wheel. I mean, go ahead and try out new things, but oftentimes your opponent is not going to react the way you imagined. Address the threat. Whether you are initiating or defending, you need to address your opponent's weapon. Retreat and reevaluate. It is very difficult and frustrating to fence someone using unconventional techniques. If you find yourself in this situation, try not to just attack into an opening. This one had me a little confused, as Beta initiated with what looks like an Unterhau that is in really close measure, and then comes up into hanging. It doubled out as Alpha didn't address the threat, and actually began initiating with a thrust at the same moment Beta entered measure. And honestly, I don't think an Unterhau from Posta Breve against someone waiting in Flug is a very good idea. I guess if it was from Posta Breve, that is a Satani into hanging? I think this is an example of what Beta intended to accomplish. He comes into measure, steps offline, and taps Alpha on the elbow. It didn't double as Alpha attempted a cut and not a thrust, but ultimately I would categorize this as reinventing the wheel, as well as tippity tap. This also illustrates my previous point on how these more unusual techniques can sometimes work, but rely upon your opponent reacting in a specific way, in this case with a cut and not a thrust. I want to begin with when this approach is effective before pointing out when it is not. Keep in mind that this is one of the most common approaches to fencing I see, and one of the most common causes of doubles. Keep an eye on Alpha. So some really textbook fencing. Alpha's initial strike addresses his opponent's weapon by attacking the top right blouse and creating a strong bind. Then he leaves the bind and strikes the opposite side. Again, he creates a threat, then leaves the bind to strike alternating openings after gauging his opponent's response. This works as his opponent has a more defensive disposition and is responding to his initial attack by attempting to bind, only to be overwhelmed with alternating attacks. This is a really common approach to fencing, as it can be really effective against someone with a more defensive disposition. Now let's take a look at what happens when the same fencer, again referred to as Alpha, uses the same approach against someone who has an aggressive disposition. So we see a double, and even when it does not double, it is overall just messy fencing. This is because both fencers are meeting aggression with aggression. When one leaves the bind to make a new strike, so does the other, and it is a bit of a crapshoot about whose strike lands first. Sometimes Alpha gets it, sometimes Beta, but mostly it is unclear and riddled with afterblows and double hits. It's like that shape and holes game you give to children. Aggressive openings that leave the bind and makes alternating cuts match up nicely with defensive opponents, much like the triangle piece matches up nicely with the triangle-shaped hole. There is no conflict. However, if you use the same technique against an equally aggressive opponent,
gonna have a bad time.
Additionally, and I see this all the time in tournament footage, if a technique does not match up well against a certain opponent, much like trying to cram a circle piece into a triangle-shaped hole, don't just keep trying the same thing again and again, expecting a different result.
Lord, I wonder what's got the matter. I'm tired.
Hopefully you get my point. These next series of clips revolve around defending against a thrust with a thrust. Don't get me wrong, this is a legitimate technique if done correctly. Scambio de punta, or the exchange of thrusts, come to mind. But in order to do it correctly, you need to displace your opponent's point and control the center line. If you don't, you will double out. It is kinda disappointing because I think Alpha was really close to pulling off a cool technique that most people seem not to even attempt. Now, if you want to execute the exchange of points, step offline to create distance away from your opponent's point, whereas we see Alpha taking a step or two directly back. Second, keep your hands low and your point high. This will place your opponent's weak upon your strong, giving you leverage and the ability to more easily control the center line. We see Alpha extend his sword out almost horizontally, giving him no leverage over his opponent, and does not control the center line. My key takeaway point for this would be that it was a good attempt at a historical technique, but it just wasn't executed well and likely just requires more practice to pull off in sparring. Honestly though, it may not have even been an attempt at Scambio de Punta, and may have just been the result of a bind and both of them thrusting in at a opening. The more negative aspect of this, however, is that you should not double out 4 times in the same match, especially if it is to the same thing. If something isn't working out for you, try something different. That's all I have for this video, but I have many more double hits I can still take a look at. I hope you liked this video, and if you didn't, please let me know why in the comments so that I can try to improve. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to the next video.